The morning sun spilled its gentle warmth across the narrow streets, and the aroma of fresh bread mingled with the distant hum of the city awakening. She stepped outside and felt the cool breeze brush against her face, carrying whispers of yesterday and promises of today. She walked slowly down the cobbled lane, her thoughts drifting like autumn leaves caught in a lazy wind. The chatter of neighbors and the distant clink of cups from the small cafes along the street seemed like music orchestrated just for her. She smiled at the sight of children running barefoot across the square, their laughter echoing in harmony with the birds overhead. The sky above was painted in shades of pale gold and tender rose, and every step she took felt like a note in a gentle song. She turned the corner, and the familiar sight of the little tea house greeted her, its wooden facade worn by time but comforting like an old friend inside. The smell of brewing tea wrapped around her like a warm embrace, and the soft murmur of conversations formed a gentle background to the quiet symphony of the morning. She slid into the corner seat where the sun fell in a perfect slant across the table, her eyes catching the steam rising from the cup of chai in front of her. The first sip was a warm comfort, a familiar taste that carried memories of countless mornings spent in the company of friends and strangers alike. The bell above the door jingled, and she looked up to see her friends arriving, each with a smile that could chase away the heaviest clouds. There was Layla with her hair tied in a loose braid and a sparkle in her eyes that always made the world seem brighter. Next to her was Arman, who had a quiet strength in his presence and a laugh that could fill the room like sunlight filtering through leaves. And finally there was Sammy, who carried a restless energy and a voice that always drew stories from even the shyest corners of the heart. They settled into the usual rhythm, the gentle teasing, the shared stories, the laughter that rose and fell like a tide sweeping over hidden shores. Each cup of tea seemed to deepen the bond between them, a silent understanding that no words could fully capture. The afternoon sun climbed higher, painting golden streaks across the table, highlighting the steam curling from their cups and the soft shadows dancing on the walls. Their conversation meandered like a lazy river, touching memories old and new. Layla spoke of the book she had been reading, of worlds that seemed distant yet familiar, of characters who lived and breathed in the space between imagination and reality. Arman recounted his recent wanderings through quiet streets and bustling markets, the scent of spices and fresh herbs lingering in his words like an invisible trail guiding him along the path of his journey. Sammy shared the small adventures that often went unnoticed by others, the stolen moments of joy, the sudden bursts of laughter in the midst of ordinary days. The tea in their cups cooled slowly, yet no one seemed to notice the passing of time, for the hours stretched and bent in the gentle cocoon of their presence. Each sip was a pause, each glance a quiet celebration of friendship that needed no grand declarations to exist. They talked of dreams that hovered like delicate clouds over their heads, of fears that whispered in the quiet moments of the night, and of hopes that flickered like tiny flames refusing to be extinguished. The tea house itself seemed to breathe with them, as if it had been waiting for these gatherings for years. Every crack in the wooden floor, every faded painting on the wall, every chair that creaked under weight of familiar bodies held the memory of countless stories told in the golden light of mornings that began with the simple act of sharing a cup of tea outside. The world carried on, oblivious to the gentle magic happening within these walls. Cars passed by with indifferent hums, people hurried with purpose, and the city's pulse moved in relentless rhythm. But inside here, time softened and stretched and curled around the friends like a tender blanket, shielding them from the cold edge of reality. She felt a sense of belonging that went beyond words, a knowing that whatever storms raged outside these walls, the warmth of friendship would always offer a harbor, a quiet space where laughter could linger and hearts could speak freely without realizing it. The afternoon had melted into evening, and the sunlight had shifted to a deeper amber hue, casting long shadows across the worn wooden floor. The aroma of tea had become intertwined with the scent of old books and polished wood, creating a tapestry of comfort that wrapped around their senses. They lingered on stories half told and memories half remembered, and in that lingering there was a beauty that needed no embellishment, for it existed in the simplicity of presence and the quiet understanding that some moments were meant to be savored slowly, like the last drop of tea at the bottom of a cup. The first star appeared in the sky like a shy witness to the laughter that still floated through the air, and the friends paused to notice its gentle light. For a moment the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for nothing in particular except the continuation of this shared serenity. They spoke softly now, voices dipping into whispers, each phrase carrying weight of unspoken gratitude and silent affection. The world outside might demand urgency and constant motion, but here they were suspended in a bubble where the only measure of time was the rising and falling of laughter, the clinking of cups, and the gentle breathing of those around them. And as the night drew its velvet curtain across the city, their hearts were full with the simple richness of being together, of sharing moments that required no embellishment, no dramatic gestures, no need for applause, only the quiet echo of friendship that lingered long after the last sip of tea had been taken. The evening grew cooler, and the gentle glow of lanterns cast flickering shadows across the tea house walls, creating patterns that danced with the movement of their hands and the subtle sway of their bodies. Each shadow seemed to carry a fragment of their conversation, a secret echo of laughter or a whispered memory that belonged only to them. Outside, the streetlights began to hum softly, illuminating the cobblestones in pools of gold and silver, and the distant sounds of the city drifted in like waves, barely reaching the sanctuary of warmth they had created inside. The friends leaned back in their chairs, their eyes reflecting the soft glow and the quiet contentment that settled over them like a gentle blanket. Layla tilted her head and spoke of colors she had noticed that day in the fabric of life, shades that went unnoticed by most, the deep blue of a scarf fluttering in the wind, the soft green of moss on an old wall, the glimmer of sunlight caught in the curve of a puddle. She described them with a reverence that made them seem like treasures hidden in plain sight, and as she spoke the others listened not only to her words but to the way her eyes lit up with discovery and wonder. Arman laughed softly and shared a story of a stray cat that had followed him through the market that morning, its golden eyes shining with curiosity and mischief. Every alley and corner it had explored seemed to hold a tiny adventure, and he recounted each step with warmth and humor that made them all feel as if they had been there alongside him. Sammy jumped in with a tale of a fleeting encounter in the park, a small boy chasing bubbles that shimmered in the sunlight and a musician playing a tune so beautiful it seemed to pause the movement of the world for just a heartbeat. The simplicity of the moments seemed almost sacred, the kind of magic that hides in ordinary days waiting to be noticed and celebrated. The cups were refilled again and again, the tea now a companion to the unfolding evening, a silent witness to stories that twisted and turned like rivers flowing over stones smoothed by time and experience. They spoke of music that had touched their souls, of scents that transported them to places long forgotten, of dreams that hovered like invisible birds just beyond reach and yet persistent in their presence. Every so often a laugh would break through the gentle hum of conversation, sharp and bright like sunlight piercing clouds, or a sigh would drift across the table heavy with unspoken thoughts that somehow felt lighter simply because they shared the weight with each other. The tea house seemed to grow with them, expanding to embrace not only their voices but their silences as well, as if it understood that the spaces between words were just as important as the words themselves. In those pauses there was reflection and empathy, a quiet acknowledgement that every life carries a mosaic of moments, some bright and some shadowed, and here in the amber glow of the evening they could breathe and simply exist without masks or pretense. Layla traced the rim of her cup with her fingers, watching the steam curl and rise like a delicate spiral of smoke from some faraway fire. She spoke of longing, not in words of sadness but of yearning for beauty, for connection, for those fleeting glimpses of perfection that sometimes appear in the ordinary, and the others nodded, feeling the resonance in the depths of their own hearts. Arman leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table, and recounted memories from childhood, streets lined with fragrant blossoms from hidden gardens that smelled of honey and rain, from afternoons spent climbing trees that reached toward the sky with reckless determination. His voice carried a rhythm that made time bend around them, making them feel for a moment that they were all children again, running barefoot and chasing dreams that felt as real as the ground beneath their feet. Sammy laughed at the memory but then grew thoughtful and spoke of the roads not taken, the moments that slipped by unnoticed, the small opportunities that seemed insignificant at the time but had left tiny scars and gentle lessons behind. Each revelation wove them closer together, creating a tapestry of trust and intimacy that needed no declarations, for it existed in the quiet listening, in the shared smiles, in the soft brushing of hands across the table. They watched the tea settle in their cups, glowing softly like captured sunlight, and in its warmth they found a reflection of their own comfort and security. The night deepened and the world outside seemed to slow its relentless pace. The hum of traffic softened to a distant lullaby, and the occasional murmur of a passerby faded into nothingness, leaving them suspended in a moment that felt eternal. Each story told became a bridge connecting hearts and minds, and even the moments of silence were not empty but full of understanding and gentle acknowledgement that they were seen and known and accepted without condition. The air grew fragrant with the subtle mingling of tea and evening flowers from the window box outside, a scent that spoke of home, of belonging, of small miracles that exist unnoticed until one pauses long enough to feel them. They spoke of love not in grandiose terms but in the small gestures that often go unnoticed, a hand resting on a shoulder, a shared glance that says more than words could convey, a smile that lingers in memory long after it is given and received. Each word hung in the air like a delicate thread, weaving invisible patterns around them, connecting the present with past and future in a way that felt timeless. The friends lingered on in this suspended reality for hours, noticing the small details that made life extraordinary, the way the light touched the worn edges of the table, the way the teacups reflected the soft glow of lanterns, the subtle warmth of a shared glance that said, "I am here, I understand you." They spoke of journeys that awaited them beyond the walls of the tea house, of challenges and opportunities, of people they would meet and places they would see, and in sharing these dreams they made them more tangible, more real and more beautiful. Each moment spent together seemed to crystallize into memory, a jewel that would remain bright even when separated by distance or circumstance. The world outside might demand haste and productivity, but here time moved in harmony with the rhythm of hearts beating in unison, in laughter, in thought, in silent companionship. And as the night deepened they felt an undeniable truth, that the value of life lay not in the grandiose events but in these quiet gatherings where presence and attention were offered freely and received without expectation. The tea house held them gently, as if it were aware of the sacredness of this ordinary night, a guardian of stories, a witness to the weaving of invisible threads of friendship that would stretch across time and space, carrying with them the warmth and light of shared hearts. The lanterns dimmed as the night deepened and a soft hush settled over the tea house. Like a gentle sigh, the friends lingered in their seats, savoring the final warmth of tea as the shadows stretched and melted into the corners of the room. The voices had softened, now words becoming whispers, punctuated by laughter that floated like drifting petals across the table. Layla leaned back in her chair, her eyes reflecting the quiet glow of the lanterns, and spoke of simple joys, the ones that often passed unnoticed: the curl of steam from a cup, the way sunlight played across a windowsill, the scent of rain lingering in the air. And as she spoke, the others listened with a reverence, as if the words themselves were a kind of sacred offering. Armin smiled and shared a story of a journey taken long ago through winding roads and quiet villages, where every face told a story and every smile carried the weight of countless untold lives. He spoke slowly, letting each phrase sink into the space between them like soft rain soaking into thirsty earth. Sammy chuckled softly and recounted the little absurdities of the day: a lost shoe, a misplaced letter, a conversation that had gone sideways in the most unexpected and delightful ways. Each tale, no matter how small or large, seemed to build invisible bridges between them, connecting heart to heart with a quiet and undeniable strength. The evening deepened and the stars outside appeared one by one like distant sparks of magic in the vast dark sky. They pressed their faces to the windows, now watching the world beyond the lantern glow, the street quiet except for the occasional passing car or the distant bark of a dog. And in the silence between these sounds there was a gentle recognition of the beauty that exists in ordinary life. The teacups sat half full or half empty, as if reflecting the fullness of the moments already lived and the possibilities still lingering in the air. Every gesture, every smile, every soft word shared seemed to solidify into a memory that would linger long after they had parted. Each friend felt the quiet pulse of belonging, the deep comfort of being seen fully and completely without need for pretense or explanation. They spoke now of tomorrows, not with anxiety but with a quiet hope, a recognition that life would continue its relentless motion. Yet these moments of connection would remain an anchor in the hearts of each. The tea house seemed to exhale with them a soft breath of recognition that it too had been part of something lasting and precious, that it had witnessed the weaving of invisible threads of understanding and affection that would stretch far beyond these walls. As the night approached its deepest hour, they rose slowly from their seats, lingering in the final warmth of the lantern light. The coats brushed softly against each other as they moved toward the door, and in that touch there was a silent promise of return, of more shared mornings of tea and laughter and the simple joy of presence. They stepped out into the cool night air, the stars overhead shimmering like a delicate tapestry stretching across the sky. The streets were quieter now, the city's pulse slowed to a gentle hum beneath their feet, and the familiar scents of the neighborhood mingled with the crisp night air, creating a sense of calm that wrapped around them like a soft blanket. They walked together for a few steps in companionable silence, each lost in thought yet profoundly aware of the other's presence. Their hearts carried the warmth of the evening, the subtle glow of lantern light embedded in memory like a gentle ember that would not fade. Layla glanced at the others and smiled, a slow soft curve of lips that spoke of gratitude and love. Armin nodded with a quiet contentment, a deep calm that settled into his bones, and Sammy laughed lightly, a sound that seemed to scatter the last lingering shadows of fatigue and worry. Each step toward home was lighter than it had been before, each breath deeper and more full of life and possibility. The night stretched on around them, filled with invisible stories and quiet mysteries, and yet they carried their own magic within their hearts, a magic born of friendship and tea and the simple act of being together. In the distance, the first hints of dawn began to brush the horizon with delicate shades of pink and gold, a promise of new beginnings and gentle continuations. The friends paused for a moment, feeling the hush of the world around them, the quiet of early morning mingling with the remnants of their laughter and conversation, and in that pause there was an understanding that life itself is a series of such moments, small and unassuming yet capable of filling the soul with warmth and light. They exchanged soft goodbyes, lingering just long enough to imprint the memory of each smile, each glance, each word spoken into their hearts, and then they turned toward their separate paths, carrying the shared warmth with them, a steady glow that would accompany them through the mundane and the extraordinary alike. The tea house behind them rested quietly, awaiting the return of familiar footsteps and new stories, and in the calm of the night it seemed to breathe gently, holding the echoes of laughter and the lingering aroma of tea, as if to say that here in these ordinary moments extraordinary things happen, hearts connect, stories are born, and life unfolds with gentle grace. And as they walked away into the soft embrace of night, they each carried a quiet certainty that the beauty of friendship is found not only in grand gestures or dramatic adventures but in the simple act of being present together, sharing the ordinary in an extraordinary way, with laughter, with stories, and with the tender warmth of tea.